In news further afield, the United Nations and United States have added to international outrage over a hardline bill that the Ugandan parliament passed yesterday. The legislation imposes severe punishment for same-sex acts. Some acts are labeled as crimes that are punishable by death. The United States has warned Uganda of economic repercussions if a law banning sexual minorities with a threat of long jail terms comes into force. The top UN Human Rights has called on President Yoweri Museveni to reject it, saying it is against Uganda's own constitutional provisions of non-discrimination. Perhaps to take this discussion further, we're joined via Zoom by Corlett Letlojane, Executive Director at the Human Rights Institute of South Africa. Corlett, good afternoon. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us here.
I just want to provide context to frame the discussion, perhaps as we continue. Want us to really question, or rather, destabilize heteronormativity. Because as we know, it's important to note that by agreeing to include other people, we must be careful not to then exclude them by othering them or making them against the norm. So, where we obviously see heteronormativity as the norm. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, because obviously this is what is part of the framework that has ended up here based on what's happened in Uganda. So now with more than 30 African countries already having banned same-sex relations, this new law from Uganda seems to go a step further by criminalizing anyone who merely identifies as LGBTQI+. What is your reaction of this new bill?
Thank you very much for that, analysis and giving us this opportunity. I think the situation in Uganda, it has been worrying for quite some time. There was an attempt to push for this bill some years back. This is before 2014, when the civil society from Uganda and also in the continent advocated for protection of people in Africa, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights passed a resolution then in Angola in 2014, really calling member states to desist from persecuting persons on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. They prescribed that such acts can be supported by enabling legislation. Laws were encouraged to be promulgated that will protect citizens and also ensuring that persons are not persecuted or they are not harmed or there is no violence directed at them based on their sexual orientation. So we are very concerned and worried that Uganda has again gone out of its way, not only undermining the African Commission or the AU resolutions, but it has actually even violated the rights that ECOWAS promotes in the sub-region. Not ECOWAS, actually, the East Africa Community that has been working very hard and ensuring that there's peace and security in that sub-region. So we are concerned, and we are once again calling the African Commission to call Uganda to repeal that law. That law, it contradicts, it's in conflict with that resolution 275.
Yeah, absolutely. The bill is inherently discriminatory. It suppresses Ugandans' rights to equality and inclusivity. And for those who are in support of the new law, they say that it will go a long way in upholding traditional value systems, and want us to question whether Ugandan Parliament, ultimately exists to represent and serve everyone, not just a traditional value system.
And this is what the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which the Ugandan government is a state party to. The African Charter is very explicit about non-discrimination of any kind to anyone, regardless of their sex or gender, economic background. So African values are values that are, enshrined to be positive rights. the African Charter, it calls for those African values that are in conflict with rights guaranteed in the Charter to be declared invalid or to be discouraged. Now, Parliament is supposed to be ensuring that there's oversight in terms of laws that are, enacted by the country. So if Parliament promotes a law that conflicts with a treaty, because the African Charter is a treaty, is an instrument that the citizens of this country need to be protected. The country is obliged to promote laws that will give effect to the African Charter. So those laws that are in contradictory, they need to be repealed. Now it gives another opportunity for all activists in the continent, those that are in solidarity with the citizens, the activists in Uganda, to work together again. And I know that Uganda is not even a state party to the African Court on Human and People's Rights, whereby they can even sign a declaration which gives citizens direct access to the African Court, because they will then begin by exhausting the local remedies. Now, if situations such as this, where access to that African Court will be difficult, it means the African Commission must intervene. So this is what HIRISA and its partners will be advocating. The 75th session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights will take place in May, and the citizens, the human rights defenders and NGOs around the continent will be meeting, and this issue will be on the agenda of the NGOs convening under the NGO forum. The venue will be confirmed also to indicate whether this will be a virtual or in-person engagement. So activists around the continent have been monitoring the situation, and we are working together to once again an advocacy against this. I know that even former Justice, Chief Justice, Deputy Justice Mwepe at the African Court then did really elaborate extensively, calling Uganda and member states that had convened in Angola to seek unity and to work with the people of the continent rather than create arbitrary laws that will end up arresting people.
If you can hear me, unfortunately we're running out of time, but you've really emphasized Uganda's obligations under international human rights law. You have spoken about the circumstances in which the current bill is coming to effect, and this obviously also leads into the geopolitics of Uganda's anti-gay bill, simply because we saw this is going to impact the economy at large. But I also want to bring in another point just very quickly in conclusion. We've seen reactions from the Southern African Anglican Archbishop Thabo Makgoba. He's appealing to Ugandan President Museveni to not go ahead with this. But we also heard from the Anglican Archbishop in Uganda that there were talks about threatening to break away from and sever ties with links to the Church of England. In view of what's also being discussed, where there's talks about gaining a consensus on blessing same-sex marriages amongst other developments, how do you think religion's also playing a role in what is perpetuating the issue of homophobia? Why is it still largely prevalent in Africa?
It is still very much prevalent in Africa because, most African states, they are, promote what we call African values. The African values, however, are values that have got nothing to do with what is written, what is being practiced. I think if we have to go back to the African values, and even the Christian or religious, institutions and organizations, we know that before colonizations, citizens used to reside together until these terms, became popularized and people begin to really review them as something that is arbitrary, as something that is Eurocentric, as something that has got nothing to do with us Africans. I think this is where the problems, there's lack of education, there's lack of information that we really need in the African continent, because there is no way that we can distinct ourselves from other societies of the world, especially using religion as well. If you look at religion, there's non-discrimination. It's one of the elements that you cast across all religions. There's love, there's peace, there's reconciliation. No one has got a right, to torture and to treat others in inhuman and degrading manner. So we are glad that some of the religious leaders are coming out against this behavior, because sentences such as death sentence, sentences that life sentence as well, these are arbitrary and very high capital that individual can be subjected to such high punishment for only exercising their rights, which we believe the African Charter has guaranteed.
Corlett, we seem to be struggling with your connection, but I'm going to leave the conversation there. Thank you for your time here on the SABC. Corlett Letlojane, Executive Director at Human Rights Institute of South Africa, weighing in the back of a hardline bill that was Ugandan Parliament passed yesterday. Lots of international outrage, lots of reactions coming through in the continent. A developing story we'll continue to monitor on the SABC.